You know, the audacity of some of these cult members, unrelated to Republicans or Democrats, because that's all they are, is white supremacists, and some of them just cult members, to say that Bad Bunny didn't have not even a word in English, which wasn't not only true, but you also saw that the event also had Lady Gaga, which obviously did a whole section there in English. So it just shows you and proves you that it's just about bigotry, it's about politics, you know, and hate. Because obviously all he was spreading love. It doesn't matter your language, it was spreading love. Obviously this country was not founded in English. More than 55% of this country spoke Spanish anyway for over 500 years. And I know as a Puerto Rican descended from Native Americans, we had many different languages. I was Arawakan, okay, from Arawak. So it's lies, right? And you know, we had Dutch here, we had French that came over, we had so many people. But the arrogance of a lot of these white supremacists to think that we had to speak English, when even our states, many of them still have Spanish names: La Florida, California, Texas, Nevada, all these Spanish states and a lot more. And yet they want to come with the arrogance and push, you know, and dare to even call actual Native American descendants like Puerto Rican not American. Well, we are more American than even Trump, whose mother came here as an immigrant in the 1930s. How dare they, right? But I think I explained a lot about Puerto Rican history. I've done this video up here. You can watch it with statistical facts. But I think this young lady, Amanda, did an excellent job explaining it. So I want you to watch this right now.
My name is Amanda, and if you don't know, I like to talk about Puerto Rican history here on my page, amongst a lot of other things. But with Bad Bunny having the Super Bowl performance, I think it's important to educate a lot of people on some particular things that maybe you might have been missing out on. I love talking about Puerto Rican history, reading about Puerto Rican history, and trying to educate people on Puerto Rican history because it's extremely powerful. And the existence of Puerto Ricans in and of itself and Puerto Rican history is a history of resistance. Bad Bunny's existence is a form of resistance. The existence of the Puerto Ricans that were on that big stage is an act of resistance. And we'll talk about why, because it's really not a hyperbolic statement. And we'll start with this. My grandparents were alive and living on the island when this flag was banned. You would go to federal prison. It was against the law. It was made illegal to fly the Puerto Rican flag in Puerto Rico. It was also illegal to sing the national anthem of Puerto Rico as well. Yet resistance groups in the 40s would fly that flag all the time. Nationalist parties and independence parties would fly that flag all the time as a form of resistance, even though you were being arrested and sent to federal prison for doing so. Flying that flag was an act of resistance in the 40s, and it's an act of resistance now. Even picking the original Puerto Rican colored flag is an act of resistance. The light blue that you saw, that is the original color on the Puerto Rican flag. Now, when you look at the Puerto Rican flag, especially when you're seeing it on a federal level, it's this dark blue. Why? Because the United States federal government wanted the Puerto Rican flag to match the American flag. So they made the blue match the blue that's in the American flag. They wanted Puerto Ricans to assimilate. And it's the same tactic that they used with the Hawaiians and the Native Americans, right? Force these people to assimilate, force them to adopt our names, force them to adopt our language, force them to adopt our culture. Bad Bunny speaking in Spanish and singing in Spanish is also a form of resistance, because in the early 1900s, the United States federal government tried making English the official language of Puerto Rico and tried to strip Spanish from the Puerto Rican people. But it took the Puerto Rican people resisting and fighting back against that for the United States government to give up on that plight. And it is important to note that Puerto Rican citizens were only given citizenship status because the United States federal government wanted to use them in World War I and World War II. They wanted to use them in the wars. That's why they granted them U.S. citizenship status. Not because they ever saw them as equals. They never will. The United States federal government will never see Puerto Ricans as equals, and many racist MAGA white people also won't see Puerto Ricans as equals. And I'm going to give you two parallels, one from the past and one from quite literally yesterday, to show this point. One, in Congress, when it was presented the idea of Puerto Ricans becoming U.S. citizens because we can use them to benefit the United States Army and military, et cetera, when they were presented this idea in Congress, congressmen literally referred to Puerto Ricans as barbaric cannibals, as dirty, barbaric cannibals who cannot think for themselves. And last night, you have people like Laura Loomer, who did campaign with Donald Trump and was on his plane with him for multiple different campaign stops in 2024 and is someone who's heavily associated with Donald Trump, tweet, "What the hell is this illegal farm worker, non-English shit on my TV? Someone call ICE." Puerto Ricans have never and will never be considered equals. Having people who advise Donald Trump and are near Donald Trump and associated with Donald Trump and campaign with Donald Trump and rode on his plane with him and has pictures with him saying that and regurgitating that idea that, one, Puerto Ricans are illegal immigrants, even though we have U.S. citizenship status, and to call them dirty farm workers only regurgitates the same sentiment that was said in Congress back in the early mid-1900s, that Puerto Ricans are just a bunch of barbaric, cannibalistic, dirty individuals. It's the same talking point, just different font. But to Laura Loomer's point about the farm workers, those fields, the coffee fields, the sugarcane fields, they used to be plantations because Puerto Rico has a really long-standing, deep history with slavery. Being that Christopher Columbus actually landed in Puerto Rico and not the United States, and being that Puerto Rico actually had the enslaved people there brought there first before the United States of America, history that apparently other people don't know because the United States of America celebrates Christopher Columbus as some sort of savior, even though he's never stepped foot here. Those fields, when the United States American government was forcing Puerto Ricans to work on them, they were forcing them to work on them without shoes because Puerto Ricans couldn't even afford shoes because they were in such deep states of poverty because the United States federal government didn't actually give them a system to provide for themselves. So a lot of Puerto Ricans had infections that were going in their feet and were dying within like 30 years of life. And so the lifespan of Puerto Rico was shooting down, and the United States federal government was like, what's going on? Why are all these Puerto Rican people dying? Well, it's because they were malnourished, they were overworked, and they weren't giving any sort of working conditions or unionship when they were working on these farms. And then when the United States federal government was trying to figure out what was going on and they sent American doctors down here, some of the American doctors were actually caught injecting cancer into their patients and admitted it in the letter that they wrote, and then they had to flee because they admitted in the letter that they wrote that they were injecting Puerto Ricans with cancer. Now, this was all during the time that they were actually experimenting and testing birth control on Puerto Rican women without their knowledge and sterilizing them without their knowledge. And testing Agent Orange on us because, you know, we were going to use it for the wars. Yeah, so that's Puerto Rican history for you. The fact that Bad Bunny performing at the Super Bowl has caused this much problems, a brown man who speaks Spanish, a Puerto Rican man existing, the fact that it's caused this many problems only tells you about the particular people it causes problems with, the sentiments and ideas that they believe. You don't have to know a language for you to enjoy the show. But they were acting like it was the most un-American thing in the world for them to do a show with a global international superstar, with the NFL being a business and corporation that wants to expand around the world. That's why they're hosting games in the UK all the time and in Brazil, because they want to expand. So having a global superstar who's the most streamed artist in the entire world, most popular artist in the entire world, come and perform actually makes a lot of logical and business sense. It makes a lot of logical and business sense. Yet they couldn't fathom that. A brown man speaking Spanish on stage, a Puerto Rican? How dirty of them. Listen, I go more into depth about the actual history of every single thing I mentioned, the barbaric treatment of Puerto Ricans in my videos that I've done on Puerto Rican history, but this is a more general, brief video to kind of encompass everything that has happened. And that's only a fraction of it. That's really only a tiny piece of Puerto Rican history. And this was a beautiful message for Latinos. It really was. He brought everybody together. He shouted out everybody in the Americas. I know the Canadians even felt a little special by it. So it is a really beautiful message about unification, but it's also a message about the resistance of Puerto Rico. It was a performance for the culture. An island that's a territory of the United States of America that nobody knows the history of, a people that have constantly been abused. It was such an amazing performance, and I truly think anybody with a problem with it is 100% absolutely just speaking out of racism.
As you saw, even us Americans, Puerto Ricans, American citizens, have always been treated as second-class citizens. So those Latinos that have been naturalized, don't you ever think that you're going to be accepted like one of them. And when I mean one of them, I'm not talking about what people classify as white, because that was created in 1676 to create a hierarchy of class, because blacks, Native Americans, and many of so-called white people, Irish, Dutch, were uniting to fight against the elite. This is about the elite. And you know this is true because if you look back, even when Native Americans, so-called Mexicans, right, were already here on this land in the 1929, 1930, 31, 32, or the 1930s, American citizen, Mexican American citizen, that they did not cross the border crossed them, right? But nevertheless, they were already here in Texas and California and all that. We got rid of, our government got rid of over 1.6 million of them. More than 65% were American citizens, okay? And this happened in the 1930s. America used them, got some Mexicans from Mexico and used them for the farms because everybody else was out fighting in war, right? And our crops were dying and everything was dying, the economy. So we went and got Mexicans. And as soon as a couple of years things got better, what we did, we started getting rid of them again, including American citizens that were already here for thousands of years, lost their lands, their properties, and all that. And guess what? Second World War II, we did it again in the 1950s, guys. So wake up, We know because every treaty that these elites have made, they have broken. And the world is waking up. We need to unite as Latinos. We need to start our own system where we cooperate with each other instead of relying on these elites running the world. As you can see, and I'm sorry to say this, look, people have these things about dictator, Venezuela, and Cuba. I predicted a lot of stuff because I know history as well. Okay, you got to understand, like Cuba right now. Okay, when we went to Venezuela, what we stopped doing, we stopped allowing oil and transport from Venezuela to Cuba, and Cuba's not doing good right now. They haven't been doing good for a lot of decades, but why? You could blame dictators all you want, and that might be a factor, okay? But one of the biggest factors, if you have an island that produces stuff but cannot sell to other countries, right? Because they got winters too, right? Or they go through different process of cultures where the plants won't grow, right? Well, we have a barter system where you trade. But if you're not allowed to trade, if you're not allowed to buy or sell, how are you going to survive as an island? That's what America did. We stopped and we embargoed. We put negative sanctions. We don't even allow the dollar in there. By now allowing the dollar, obviously they can't compete with other countries. Thank God now because of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They have accepted on Cuba. But unfortunately, this is why the dollar's down, because it's based on supply and demand. And we are trying to stop that as the elites, as a nation, because they're scared of losing control of that power, right? That being said, thank you, Mexico, because I know Mexico is sending over oil, sending over food to Cuba, and that's what we need to do as all Latino communities or Americans, true Americans, to unite and support one each other and grow, because it ain't even about white. Again, it's about an elite group of people that's running this nation, and it's become obvious who they are. They're the one that used to own the slave transaction on slave ships, okay? They're the one that have that religious belief, and you could prove it even in the Bible, which the first 5 books, by the way, happens to be the Torah, and I could educate these people. Matter of fact, I've done this video. It's on my Facebook page. You can go see it, and it's historical facts. People need to wake up because you're being manipulated and you're being controlled, okay? And there will come a time, and I believe that in Revelations chapter 3, verse 2 and 9, it says it, that the world is going to move, and those people that were in control are going to lose all power and control. And it's coming. The dollar's collapsing. This empire is collapsing. It's going to change, a major change in power. Okay? And obviously, we are so-called the minority. Once we unite, we will see that we are actually the majority. And it's going to change. And that's what they're trying to stop as well. Okay? They don't want to lose control and power of that petrodollar. But it's too late. Because that system, that coercion, is over with. Because one of the biggest countries used to control that was Saudi Arabia, and they joined BRICS as well in June of 2024. This is why you're going to see a lot of wars. It's inevitable. This is why you're going to see they're going to try to attack Iran. Iran is more powerful than you understand. I saw it. I said it in visions. Okay? And I've been saying it for a while. And we could see now what's going on in Iran and the United States. Israel will push the United States to attack Iran, and we're going to be humiliated. We're going to be embarrassed, and the Zionist regime in Israel is going to be wiped out. That's a terrorist state since 1948. That's not the biblical Israel of the Bible, Jacob. That's where you guys have been fooled and misled. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and share. When you comment, you help to spread, because they are paying other people to spread lies, and they're using bots to spread lies and divide us, as they've done always before, and that's how they keep conquering us. When are you gonna wake up, people? Wake the hell up. We need to unite. This ain't about Republicans and Democrats. This is about we the people against the elite. Thank you.